speakers to you this evening, and to add, it's just wonderful to see so many young people in the house. Dr. Clarke and Dr. Ben have asked that I not spend the entire evening introducing them. So instead, brief biographies have been prepared for your convenience, which you should have received by now. Before I introduce Dennis Walcott, the president of the New York Urban League, who will bring you greetings, there are several thank yous that are in order. First, I'd like to thank Reverend Grant, who is the minister of this church, who allowed us to come to him and take a chance on us this evening. As I said, it's our first venture. I'd like to thank Ron Cook, who is the program director. I'd like to especially thank him for his consistent enthusiasm and for all his time. To the brothers Yosef and Kamal, thank you for coming at a moment's notice. And to your colleague, Melvin Simmons. This would not have been possible without my staff tolerating me over the last 2 days, especially Mark, who's not here, Laverne, Renita, Ernestine, and my support help, Alan and Luther. Dennis Walcott is, I'd like to say, is my mentor. We are both relatively new staff people, I think like 6 months for Dennis and maybe 4 for me. And it would not be right if we conducted this program this evening without greetings from him. So I'd like to welcome Dennis and turn you over to him for a few minutes.
Good evening. I will be extremely brief. I just want to welcome all of you here, and this is one of our first symposiums, and this will be the first of many. And as we were planning this, one of the things that we talked about, we wanted to convey to everybody that Black history is not just in February. And we want to make sure that we have ongoing symposiums and discussions around our history, linking it to the past, as well as what's happening with our future and our youth. So I just want to welcome all of you here and thank all of you for coming out. And I will turn the program back over to Barbara, who will introduce Dr. Clarke and Dr. Ben. Thank you very much.
Dr. John Henry Clarke will be our first speaker this evening. There'll be a brief intermission, about 5 minutes, which will be followed by Dr. Ben, and then we'll open up the floor for questions. It's my great pleasure to turn you over to Dr. Clarke. Please give him a warm welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have a lot to explain and little time to explain it, because both Dr. Ben and I are veteran classroom teachers. We're accustomed to bells, so churches are not strange to us, though we don't exactly belong to any. We know something about time. My topic that will be extended by Dr. Ben is a question. What will we tell our children about our fight for freedom? Extended again, what will we tell our children about our role in history? How we survived to this point. When people say we were slaves, what do we tell our children about our slavery in particular and slavery in general? What do we tell our children so they can stop turning their face away and want to crawl under the table when you mention our condition in the world? When will they stop blaming themselves? You have not explained it to them because you have not explained it to yourself. You have to know your oppressor and the nature of his oppression and what you did about it. At what point do we sit down and not argue about TV? At what time do we sit down and tell simple stories about our revolutionary heritage and get it across to our children? We have the longest revolutionary heritage of any people on the face of the earth. We have fought longer and harder and against great odds than any people on the face of the earth. Why do our children not know this? Because if they knew this, and if they loved themselves, none of them would put poison in their veins. If they knew this, they would know that a code of conduct is expected of them, that they cannot afford to live selfishly. Their conduct must reflect the best in a whole people. And when someone tried to lead them in ways not of their liking, they should have enough sense of their own selves on this earth to say, we are not a people who engage in things of that nature. We are not a people who demean ourselves in that way. But for them to know this, they have to know what kind of society produced them. Coming out of a collective society, being forced into an individual society in order to survive. And this is an assumption. You think that you must take on the traits of your oppressor, when your role is not to take on the traits of your oppressor. Your role is to prepare to destroy your oppressor. His conduct in the world disgraces everything that can be called democracy, everything that can be called Christianity. It's even a disgrace to the thing that means the most to him, capitalism. He's misconducting himself in relationship to the one thing he used to try to hold on to the world, the apparatus of exploitation. Why can't we tell our children that whosoever God is, all people have the right and the responsibility to look at God through their own imagination and address God in a language of their own creation? Why then can't we calm ourselves down, then calm them down? What happened to the big kitchens where the family used to gather, sip some coffee, some lemonade, and began to discuss matters pertaining to the family? And if it gets too delicate, send the children out to play. And when the door opened, it is settled. Our Supreme Court would have met and rendered a decision. We didn't take the matter to the oppressor, not expecting any mercy or understanding from him in the first place. We handled it within the structure of the family. What are we going to tell our children about that period in human history before the first European wore a shoe or lived in a house that had a window, and we produced enduring societies. We did not have a word for jail because no one had ever gone to one. Didn't have a word for orphanage because no one had ever thrown away children. Didn't have a word for nursing home or old people's home because no one ever threw away grandpa and grandma. If we could fashion a society that had that much humanity, what can we do for ourselves today? And how can you explain the contradiction of a people who can build the pyramids and can't maintain a candy store in Harlem? The question came up in a meeting in Senegal. Yes, it was an arrogant member. I don't even know how he got there. He was in ethnic midstream. He didn't exactly belong to us. He didn't exactly not belong to us. He was what we call Hispanic, and he said he had enough African blood to justify being there, but he had no African loyalty. You must have African loyalty. Having the blood is not enough if you have no commitment. And he kept asking the question very arrogant and contemptuously. Yes, you people built the pyramids, but where are you now? What are you building now? Can you build the pyramid now? And I finally got tired of all this harangue. Do we need it now? Let's now build what we need right now. We need a railroad system stretching across Africa. And we need to build it. We need to have mining engineers, metal specialists to get the ore from the African earth, not to buy the rails from outside. Everything needs to come from inside of Africa itself. Now that's what we need right now. We need a road system, a rapid transportation in Africa that will take 100 years to complete. If it takes 100 years to complete, if we started this year, we've got only 99 more years to go. But if you don't start it, you never know when it's going to be finished. We must, in this generation, start things that a generation will have to complete, that another generation will have to complete. What are we going to tell our children about how we survive away from home? What are we going to tell them about the circumstances in Europe and in the world that caused them to be away from home? What are we going to tell them about the massive resistance movements in this country? What are we going to tell them about the most successful slave revolts we've had in the Americas, that have been in South America and in the Caribbean islands? Not only what are we going to tell them, what are we going to tell the people of the Caribbean islands who seem to have forgotten about it? At what point do we tell our children, stop imitating imitators? You're imitating someone who's imitating you. But if you understand the message, you would tell our children, don't waste your time with Greek fraternities and sororities because they got them. All this nonsense and hazing just to get into a sorority and a fraternity, you have to literally humiliate yourself. Nothing that you have to humiliate yourself to get into is worth being a part of. The African secret societies, where the Greeks stole the idea in the first place, were societies of responsibility, responsible people. How do we get this point across to our people? And how do we tell our children going to church while a European painted that picture up there? There's no proof that Christ looked that way. We're not arguing against Christ. We're arguing against somebody else's depiction of him arbitrarily as being white. We're not, all we have to say is that where he was born, if he wasn't a Greek, he wasn't a Roman, and the Greeks and the Romans were both mixed. If he wasn't either one of them, the chances are he was one of those other people. And all those other people were non-white. So you don't have to argue about his shade, whether he was light brown or all that. The main thing you have to establish that he wasn't a Greek and he wasn't a Roman. And once that mission is made, you walk away. I'm finished my conversation. What we have to do is to stop wasting each other's time. We're not arguing against the church. We think the church should be an instrument of a people's liberation. We think everything that touches our life should be an instrument of our liberation. And anything we are part of that fails to be an instrument of our liberation should be thrown into the ash can of history. How do we explain ourselves to ourselves, and how do we explain ourselves to our children? When they read about slavery, tell them, yes, we were slaves, but look this is what we did about it. These are the circumstances. These are the people who benefited from it. These are the people who still benefited from it. This is why we still have slavery, white and black, only it's more severe on us. And the greatest slavery was the enslavement of the mind. And every time you worship some degenerate bopper, this is a form of slavery. I'm not saying every bopper or bebopper is a degenerate, but I'm saying that degeneracy is so high in the profession, you're almost right if you name anyone in it. How we tell people that because we are not dopes, we don't hang out with dope. And how do we tell them that we came out of a society where we were secure enough to accept the female as a god without feeling so insecure, and that the people who feels insecure with the female in power are insecure as human beings? We had and still have a cultural lifestyle that makes a place for everyone in the society. Today, the woman plays an important role in the churches, behind the scenes, in the lodges, to such an extent she's not taking the power away from the man. She's freeing his hand so he could be a better man. Now, where do we say where both of us went wrong? Both of us have gone wrong at looking at each other, because we are looking at each other through the lens of Western sociology invented to downgrade us. And we cannot, under no condition, use this as a measurement. What are we going to tell them about the unification of African people? How are we going to tell them to achieve this kind of unification? How did we get lost on our way home? We need to meet again at the fork roads and read the signboards all over again. There are too many things that apply to our oppressor that does not apply to us. And we're longing to be like someone. We're longing to follow someone who don't know where they are going. We need to set direction because we're following people who have no direction. We're following a hungry and a very insecure people who want all of the world, who can't count half, who don't know a fourth, who wants everything. We're dealing with the personality bred by that ice. It's ingrained in his personality. He is anti-democratic, anti-Christian, anti-humanity. And he will achieve everything at the expense of sacrificing humanity, democracy, and everything we call religion. I have grown weary of trying to explain the difference between religion and spirituality, because each time you make the experiment, someone said, you must be godless. I am not only not godless, I try to remove all of the unnecessary underbrush away from me so I can get in closer. Whoever he or she is. And the she don't bother me either. Now, let me sum up something that has no summary and end something that has no end. Where are we in the world? And how do we find ourselves, and how do we find ourselves and our place on the map of human geography? How do we tell people what went wrong? How do we get out of the terrible contradiction? After the independence of Ghana, we were so hopeful. It was in the midst of the civil rights movement and the marches, midst of the fight for a Caribbean federation. We thought that at last we had turned the corner on our way to true freedom and true unity. We underestimated our enemies. We underestimated the members of our own group who was in the pay of our enemies. There was a whole lot of people who did not want to be free from that dominance. There was a whole lot of people who didn't want to be comfortable seeing African people in power. So between schemes and buying off a lot of them, the whole structure was lost. 10 years of celebrating on the road to freedom, 1957 to 1967. The next 10 years, almost the next 20 years, our enemy, our former colonial master, our former enslaver, had learned the secret and gradually destroyed our organization from within and from without. The concept of a Caribbean federation went by the wayside. The idea of a unified Africa fell by the wayside. The idea of total citizenship in this country fell by the wayside. We were fighting for something that was a shadow, fighting for something the enemy could easily give us without losing his power. You want integration? They give you integration. That don't give you no money. That don't give you no job. That don't give you no house. All right, so you can go in the same bathroom. You can eat at the same table. When you think of what price these hotels go, you can build 5 hotels with the money you spent going into their expensive hotels. You can build shoe factories for yourself. Because you integrated, you thought you didn't have to do anything for yourself. They'll let them into theirs. You still have to build your own. You still have to build an industry. There wouldn't be so many of our young people hung up in this stupid drama in the sand had we not failed them by not making a place for them in our own community. We had the funds. We could have opened up cloth factories, dress factories, shoe factories, all the things, just factories only dealing with the things we use. People get a little tired of me mentioning underwear because they're a little sensitive about this. But if you're going to start manufacturing, the first brother that opens an underwear factory, and the first time you say, I ain't going to buy no underwear except from that brother going to become a multimillionaire. On one item. Now let's look at all the items in the more than $200 billion we feed into the American economy. We can rescue ourselves. Why do we still with our tin cup begging at the door of a fool? We have to locate ourselves on the map of human geography. Between the Caribbean islands, the United States, other parts of South America, 250 million African people, millions in the Pacific, over 150 million in India, counting the Dravidians. 500 million in Africa, according to a count, was made 50 years ago, indicating that the African man is not going home trying to renew himself. Among the many faults we have, neglecting home, not renewing ourselves, is not one of them. We do want someone to carry on in our name. And the only way you can get someone to carry on in your name, you have to make honorable and at least some regular visits to a lady who's agreeable to helping you get your name carried on, because it's her name too. We've taken care of some business well, and the other businesses we have not taken care of quite so well. We will go into the 21st century with 1 billion people on the face of this earth. The idea is that we must not be 1 billion dependent people. We must not be 1 billion beggars. We cannot beg a thief for a piece of our own house. We have to straighten out our terminology. It wasn't about integration in the first place. Once you have justice and equality, then you can choose or not choose. There's a few black people, including a few members of my family, I'm not too hot on associating with. So that don't mean I'm going to fold. The minute integration is announced, I'm going to be right in the home of a white person. I'm going to be very selective about who I invite or whose invitation I accept. Besides, they can't cook anyway. My main point is that our enemy has a program. a well-designed program. Our enemy has a mission, and that mission is to control the world by any means necessary. If you are going to get him off of your back, you must have a mission. You must have a priesthood. And you must go into that priesthood the same as someone going into a holy order, to devote the rest of your life to making sure that your people have the basic necessities of life and more. We should break our children up into different sections. Some people should devote their entire life making sure that we have fresh water. Do you know there's not enough fresh water in the world? Reforestation. We should stop shouting nation time until we understand the responsibility of maintaining a nation. We should get closer to ourselves, closer to our children, closer to the family structure. We have lived with these fragments many years, put them back together again, learn to speak to each other again, at least in a civil tone of voice. We have so much pent-up anger. We will not take that pent-up anger out on the real cause of that anger, which is racism and white oppression. We take it out on ourselves. There's the white people who manifest the same trait. Some people in Germany allegedly killed 6 million in a gas chamber. They're willing to fight everybody except the Germans. Fight the Arabs, fight the Africans, anybody who's weak. We didn't put nobody in the ovens. We're people who know what to do with ovens. We don't cook people. Apple cobbler, deep dish apple pie, good roast, good stews. Yeah, we know what to do with ovens. We'll fix you a dish and make you know that we invented cooking. No time to point up people. What I'm trying to say in the final analysis, once we take control of ourselves, we have to stop being imitators and be innovators. And realize we've got a continent 12 million square miles. Wherever our bodies are on the face of this earth, our cultural and political heartbeat is in Africa. Whether you ever go to Africa or not, that is your home, that is the home of your spirit, and that is the heart and meaning and definition of your commitment. And none of us, any place in the world, will be free until that continent is free. The tragedy of the continent now Africans lost from their historical memory the time and the method they used when they were in charge of the state. Every African state, with no exception, is an imitation European state. And the apparatus of Europe will never work. Every African state outside of Europe, with some exceptions, is an imitation European state. I have found, much to my surprise, the Africans in the Pacific has a healthier attitude toward African unity than the Africans in Africa, the Africans in the Caribbean, and the Africans in the United States. What hit those people over there? They're less polluted with a whole lot of confusion, especially the confusion brought by a German political opportunist and Johnny-come-lately called Karl something or another, and I can't quite remember whether it was Harpo or another kind of Marx. And so we got a different kind of black Marxists, both confused. I think most of the black Marxists I met are Harpo Marxists instead of Karl Marxists. Any system in the world will work for you if you make it work for you. Any religion in the world can serve you if you make it serve you. But a religion without spirituality is not worth your time. And religion, in some cases, has toned down the concept of spirituality. We have to use the dictionary words right, and maybe we were fighting for the wrong thing. Maybe this whole concept of the United States of Africa is wrong in words. It sounds more like an imitation. Why not a union of African states? Why not regional Pan-Africanism that will feed into a continental Pan-Africanism? Why not require every African child away from home to learn at least one African language and be conversant with at least one African culture, and to have some general knowledge of Africa as part of his beginning on this earth? Why not, instead of telling them old English fairy tales, why not tell them African fairy tales, African teaching stories? And why not give them genuine African names other than Abdullah and Muhammad something? You're going to give them all these Arab names, you think you're going African. Everybody in Africa who cannot be addressed as an African is either an invader or a descendant of an invader. Once we find ourselves on the map of human geography, we have to tell our children who they are. We must tell our children what their mission must be and the kind of legacy that they have to leave for the whole world, but begin with themselves in the essential selfishness of survival. Take care of yourself first. Then find that mirror and see who's staring back at you. And who's staring back at you, use the word we. We gonna change the world. And if we gave the world the first humanity, we will give the world the next humanity. And as for getting ready for the job, we are ready to do it right now. Thank you.
Okay, we will take literally a 5-minute break. It is now 2 minutes to 8. We will get back together at 3 minutes after 8. So we're talking about 5 minutes. Okay? Thank you.
I'm mentioning it for him because he is quite modest sometimes. It's being done by, I think, the Alcan Tours, the African division on Nostrand Avenue in Brooklyn. They're listed. So if you're interested, if you don't get any literature tonight, be sure to call him. I'm sure if you're able to join him, you'll have a wonderful time. It's my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Ben, who will speak to you for the second part of the program, and then the floor will be open to questions and answers, which can be directed to both of them. Please welcome Dr. Ben.
I would further say good evening, and as my elder stated, that wasn't meant to be pleasuresome, but it meant to be rather serious. But continuing where he left off with respect to the youth, I would like to start my observation by saying, not too long ago there was an attempt by a young man, but probably not so young. That young man is no longer with us, but he tried to make the Urban League responsive to at least the Harlem community where its New York branch is located. With certain constraints, of course, Whitney Young tried to relate to all factions in the African community, to the extent that when he passed away, those with the label African nationalists, black nationalists, urban leaguers, and the likes felt a sense of sorrow one way or the other. That momentum died with Whitney Young. Today we see a possibility of the momentum catching on again. This time it is a sister who is bringing it forward. But more than that, as I look around this community, I see doctors, MD, lawyers, engineers, dishwashers, street cleaners, boot blacks. This isn't the Harlem that I've been looking at in the last few years, at least since 1966. Hopefully this is the Harlem to be and to continue. There's another factor in this that I saw that I must tell my children as the days go by. We didn't see this in churches. Of course, you saw it when Richard Allen bolted the white Methodist church. The reason was to have a church for African people, although the usual opinion is that the church belonged to all. That's the opinion. That's not the practice. But then I must then congratulate the minister who allowed us to come in this church and to present a people's position of what we are about. My children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren and others to come must know this, that this transition went back and forth as there were vacillation between the professionals within the African community, most of whom do not know where they lie. I think that Malcolm X, I'll have to tell my youngsters that the late Malcolm X said it very succinctly about us, the professionals. When the opportunity came for a professional to get even with the slave master, and I can think of one in the White House right now. Even if it was George Washington or Thomas Jefferson or even Lincoln, the professional could not distinguish between their role as a leading people to lead the others, but felt that there was some kind of identity between themselves and the boss. That happened the other day in a place called Tel Aviv. our mayor, I will have to tell my youngster that having a black face as a mayor doesn't mean a thing unless you have a black mind. I will tell my youngsters that your vote is nothing, just having a vote. Any fool can vote. All you go pull a lever or put the X. But for what are you voting? Is it going to be the same way you voted all the time? My grandmother, my great-grandmother have voted Democratic, so I'm going to be equally foolish? I would ask my children, I would say stop and think. The person that Malcolm was speaking about equally would have voted, given the chance at that time. But he would have voted just as the other fools today. Because he would have voted like the same man and asked the boss, are we sick, boss? When there was an opportunity for the slave to take care of the master as Jesus would have done. I think it's appropriate to be in the church because I would tell my siblings, you know, Jesus was a revolutionary. I was reading about the brother. I got to say brother because when he came down in Africa, it seems to me, and Herod was supposed to kill everything in sight that was a male, and JC hid among his brothers and sisters. That's his initial, JC. He hid among his brothers. Now, if JC was not black, how could this blonde child hide among these black people? I know many of you don't think so, because you would have had the same problem he had. But I'm speaking about a man who spoke the language of the people. I don't want to speak that language because it might frighten some of you. You have to run out the church. But J.C. said, give me some skin, baby, because he was of the people. So was Moses, you know, born in Egypt, place called Goshen, 85 years before he found out he was Jewish. I would have to tell my youngsters, first, before you vote and go to Tel Aviv as a congressman or a mayor, you should find where Nigeria is, where Jamaica is, where Trinidad is, Mississippi and North Carolina. Then my child, of course, would be talking about an African philosophy. I would have to tell my youngsters the reason you must look first before you even step off. You must find a philosophical concept by which you are going to live. And to find this, you must consult not only Martin Luther King, but you must consult along with Martin Luther King, along with Du Bois. You must consult Marcus Garvey, Malcolm X, Elijah Muhammad. And that's the male part. But sons, daughters, you must call up Sojourner Truth from the Dead, Harriet Tubman, Rosa Parks, and then go on home and speak to Hatshepsut. Son, you got to speak to Goddess Ma'at. You got to speak to Goddess Shu. You got to not stop in Greece because they just yesterday, son. You got to go home to the real thing. As they say, the real McCoy. Because I would say to the children, one of the reasons you will feel that you have to be bused from your neighborhood, where nobody else is busing into yours, but you busing out of yours, and you come back the same way that you went out. It would have been easy to mess you up inside without going outside to be messed up equally. But at least, if you had the good teachers that they had in the little one-room shack with a little red paint on the roof, but with a depth of determination to make the best they could with what they knew, you would have turned out a much better student. Maybe you would not have known higher mathematics, as they call it. Maybe you would not have known the amount of chemistry that Saddam Hussein knew. No. But maybe also you would have taken the whole white world to fight you, although you're only the size of the state of California. Maybe you would have understood more than what they lied to you and the press, including the Negro and colored press. You would have then known that there were Africans fighting on both sides for no reason at all. Son, you would have known that one slave master's descendant is no better than the other slave master's descendant. And you would have been able to make the distinction between a gallon of oil, and then you would have understood the role of the president in Bechtel Corporation International, that already find how they're going to make the plans for Kuwait. Embarrassing that the state of Kuwait doesn't tell Bechtel and doesn't have put out their plans for a vote. But Bechtel going to tell them already plans have been made. What I'm saying to the children is that you would have had to be able to think, besides coming inside and praying to the Lord, you had to know something to say to the Lord. Lord is tired of praise. Lord wants some serious discussion. When you come up, the Lord said, last week you brought your troubles and put it on my doorstep. This week you brought your troubles and putting it on my doorstep. 2,000 years you've been putting from 1619 in Just Virginia, you've been laying it on the doorstep. Haven't you seen I don't work in troubles? I am too busy with the sun and the moon for your benefit, unfortunately. I would tell my son that we had tell the world about the Lord. We don't need to know. We told the world. We told the world about the basic fundamental concept that keep our minds together. We had told the world before about one God. We didn't wait on Moses. The brother was all right. He was going to repeat what Akhenaten had already said. You understand, sons and daughters? Sons like you there, little sister. You don't understand the virgin concept and the immaculate conception. But you had been told that through your grand ancestors about the immaculate conception 4,100 years before others start to talk about it. At least you were speaking about Christianity before Christ. You were speaking about Osiris and goddess Isis and their little son Horus. And you said it before Abram. before Moses. But you had a different explanation, little daughter. You see, when I had to speak to her because I had to stop her to believe that the stock bring babies. They just bring them in Europe. They don't bring them in Africa. There's another thing. I had to tell a child that milk cans don't bring milk. It preserved milk. That cows bring the milk. Of course, mothers too, not only cows. But I'll tell the child, well, you don't understand that based upon the way your sisters are going now, you think that breast is just to hold up dresses. But they got another function. A few more functions at least. You see, I would get down, as I said, I'd be like Jesus Christ, speaking the language of poor people, poor folks. Jesus, who would have challenged Bush. You know, I listened to hear Bush being challenged. I listened to hear the kind of preachings that they told me that Paul spoke. Now, don't get me wrong, but Dr. Clarke said he was one time almost been a Baptist preacher. I'm not trying to get into a profession. But at least I could be a senior deacon. You see, maybe I will have to tell the child that you're expected to act like Jesus, and if not Jesus, at least like the disciples, not necessarily Paul. But you could even act like John the Baptist. Because that brother must have come to Africa and deal with baptism of the pharaohs, the purification rites that was equal carried to Jesus when he came down to study at home, Soulville, Africa, before going back to Asia. See, I have to tell this child, because I got to prepare this little boy for his baptism and confirmation. I have to confirm this little boy in the pyramids of Giza, in the pyramids of Saqqara, because I have to teach this little boy not to tell the teacher, let me give my lesson to you orally. You know, we don't write too well. You see, this boy is going out every morning on the bus. He's still coming back, can't read and write good, because the teacher can't read and write good. So I got to strengthen at least this little fellow so that when he sits in the classroom and they ask him any day to recite, to tell of his background, he doesn't start with Tarzan and Jane. And that he knows that the lion is not the king of the jungle. Lions don't live in jungles, they live on prairie. You see, I have to start to tell the little fellow that when you lie, whether it's in church or in the classroom or in the store or in the White House, it is still a lie. And no kind of Billy Graham could change it if you contact him. I would have to make my little children understand the necessity for truth. That's why the Africans had established a sister called Goddess Ma'at to deal specifically and generally with nothing else but truth. So I'll have to let my youngster know that when you go to Washington, D.C. and look at the symbols of justice with a scale hanging down, one down and one up. A woman with a sword today, they weigh 38 on the side with long clubs. I would say to my youngster, won't you look funny, 8 months pregnant with a 38 on your side and a long club of 38 inches preparing to beat somebody and put them under arrest. In other words, what I have to speak to my youngster isn't about the 3 R's, because my youngster knows that. After all, her father just built a pyramid the other day, 82 of them, in one place, and then went in Sudan and built another 30 of them. So the pyramids are no problem. Engineering was no problem. I said, son, engineering is no problem. Just go down the street at Washington and look at the copy they have there for George Washington, called the George Washington Memorial. The obelisk. The only obelisks in Europe, son, are those that they stole and carry there. Rome got the most of them. Put crosses on the top to make you believe they come from Europe. But son, I told him, son, my little daughter too, great-grands, you have to realize you cannot make a miracle happen when there is nothing. You must make miracles out of something. A miracle is taking the dirt, formulating it, cooking it, putting other specimens in it. They call it chemistry, son. Change it from its solid state to its liquid state, its gaseous state. And don't figure nobody in the world got no permission to make a bomb, to make all kinds of technical equipment of war, and tell you what you can make and can't make. Nobody got that kind of message from God to decide only African and Asian people can't make chemical weapons, but everybody else can, son. Especially, son, when you were a chemist, Greece did not exist, because Greece was not in history, even when they call it first, until 1000 BC. Son, in 1000 BC, your daddy has been gotten so old in culture that you were folding up your tent to start all over again. But you had to reopen the tent to let Thales come down to get philosophy. Let all the others come down to write their books, and to be the first to write the book after coming to learn how to write a book. So I would have some real serious discussion with my charges in terms of the African philosophical concept of existence and knowledge of self. As the first world traditional motto says, son, daughter, your first step is not to secure a Rolls Royce, neither is to secure a PhD, but your first step is to release your African mind. And if you find that it's difficult to release it where you are, take a trip home, son. I don't mind where you land. So it doesn't matter if you take a dirigible, a Zeppelin, and land straight down, or take a boat, whether it be a submarine or a surface boat, or of course an airplane. Because wherever you land in your motherland, you will find justification to be proud. If you land at the northeast coast, son, and that go for you, daughter, you will find a group of Africans as way back as 212. Some people call them Carthaginians. We call ourselves then Carthaginians. We went in all the way to the gates of Rome. Yes, son, at least Southwestern Europeans aren't brown-skinned because of the sun. That has to do something with it in the summer. But son, they are so because your ancestors did not intermingle with the elephants when they had sexual desires. They participated with Caucasian flesh. As a son, oh, and this got with little girls, I can't leave them out, of course. I wish there was some word to deal with both sexes without having, and I'm not going to say Ms. I don't know what you mean by Ms. It's something more like a B or something like that, buzzing around. Ms. all kind of negative term. Woman, chairwoman and chairman. You ain't gonna doubt about that. You know who I'm talking about. See, I don't get modern. I said, son, keep away from these modern words. They're gonna mess up everybody. I will have to talk to my son and my daughters quite seriously, of course, the grands. In terms of, mainly in terms of the ability to think. The ability to make distinction between what you believe and what you know. I believe the moon is made out of green cheese. I've already taken a lamp and shone the lamp with all the power I can on the green cheese. It didn't even bounce. It was absorbed by the green cheese. I know the moon isn't made of green cheese. If I want to ignore that, then I believe that is so. I can't treat it any longer as being a fact. I will have to let them know a belief is the absence of knowledge. It is a great hope, a great desire. Nothing wrong if you could keep it in the proper perspective. We need, as an African people, to make the proper distinction between a belief and a factual knowledge, and treat them as such. Thus we will not at least fight each other over beliefs when there is a greater need for all of us in order to come together. I will have to tell my children that you cannot wait with the lame excuse, we don't get together. Every time something is to be done, you hear us, we don't get together. The same song. How many people you want to get together to do something? You must give a figure. What is the getting together figure? Young men asked me the other day at the university, Dr. Ben, did you foresee a new leader coming to lead us? I said, you, son, you. Everybody wants, all of us want the other guy, the other woman to lead, because you don't want to get the bullets. You want to be able to come here Sunday and say, Lord, please give him help in heaven. You're talking about Martin now, because in the case of Malcolm, you said, Lord, please don't make hell too hot for him. It's a good escape. You can now relax and go back and pray and donate. And you've done yours. But then again, I have to talk to my son and my daughter. And I said, look, I don't mind, in my case, how you praying, son or daughter. But you cannot pray. You cannot come to the door here. And across the street, there's a sister or a brother in the 6th floor window with fire belching out of the other window. And you realize that fire is soon going to go in that room And don't turn around, go across the street. Don't come in here. They don't need you in here. God gonna exist with or without you. They need you cross the street at that moment to help that sister, that brother with something. At least if she jumped through the window, a coat to put around her or him so he could do without getting into shock. Then, when you have done what Jesus would have done, then you come in here and speak to your Father. It is because we have acted so contrary to human understanding and nature that we miss the boat. There's a common statement that prayer can do everything. Yes, it can do anything, but there's no guarantee it's going to do it for you. But you can do something. And you must do it without waiting for God to do everything for your lazy self. And if we do that, then the new Malcolm, the new King, the new Garvey, the new Du Bois would have been here. They would never have gone. Because we would never have sat down and wait for these individuals to do for us what we should be doing for ourselves. Are you telling me that only King could have done some thinking and Malcolm in the 60s? That only Du Bois, Garvey, and Booker T could have done something in the 60s? And only David Walker, Henry Highland Garnet, Sojourner Truth, and others could have done something in the 80s and the 1800s? And only those few people we had among us who could lead? Well, I understood that the disciples around Jesus all led. Only certain times they call on Big C for advice. Then let us act, let us lead. Let us go back and do what Richard Allen did when he bolted, sitting up in the crow nest. That's no remarks to you. Of course, I'm just reciting. Richard had to go up like all the others of us. It was not only going on the back of the bus, we had to go up. That wasn't built for the choir. That was built for us up there. We couldn't come down here. And Richard Allen said, he is not going to deal with a segregated God. If God is for segregation, then let me get away from him. And Richard said, since I don't believe God is for that, especially when I looked at God before Michelangelo painted him for Pope Julius II, he had looked like the brothers in Africa. So how come all of a sudden he don't want me in church when I built a church when he decided to plan? So I said, I got to talk very seriously to this young man. In the philosophy, the point is that we want to act without a philosophical concept. We teach a theology without its blackness. We are the only people that have a Jesus that isn't black, like us. The Japanese Jesus look Japanese. Chinese Jesus look Chinese. We are the only one that find that Jesus got no color. Then how John the Baptist saw him to baptize him? No. We've got to make, soon we're going to have to come with the gospel according to Martin Luther King, the gospel according to Malcolm X, the gospel according to Rosa Parks, the gospel. Why not? Go back and read that those people who are spoken of, who gave gospel gave it for things they did within the society. They moved men and women to act. They did and lead, and thus people wrote about them and called their doing gospel. We must be able to distinguish between singing Amazing Grace and knowing who wrote it and the reason it was written. We must understand when we sing, "Oh Lord, make me whiter than snow," to my little grandchild, and not only wash me in your blood, red blood, that's the only kind I know. If it turned black, you're dead. Wash me in your blood, black me, wash me in the blood, and I'll be whiter than snow. What image am I giving to my little child? When I have a Bible with pictures, and the only thing black in there, I mean, we got to talk it. We got to tell it. We got to talk this thing. Don't tell me anything. Go home tonight and ask your little child, point me out Jesus. Don't open the book. Put a book on the table. Put all kind of pictures. And put Michelangelo's painting of Jesus. And then tell the child, pick you me out Jesus. That child is going to pick Michelangelo's painting. So then what you have done to the child? What image you have projected to the child? And at the Nicene Conference, up until that time, Jesus was born in a cave in Bethlehem, in Ethiopia. It's at the Nicene Conference of Bishops that he suddenly was born in a cave, a manger in Bethlehem. Why should my child know our Savior when he was born even in Asia and come down to school in Africa? And before that, when his mother brought him for haven in Africa, shouldn't she hear about the role her ancestors played? That's why I am not including nothing in my history book. I am not a curriculum to be included. I am the curriculum. No, I have to tell my youngsters, when your grandparents, your ancestors were there at the banks of the Nile, contemplating on this world, developing our scientific instrument to even measure the planet, the stars, the moon, and the distance between us, writing philosophically, bringing to the first theosophical concept about the deity, establishing the concept of right and wrong by virtue, making laws to govern mankind. We were there alone. And nowhere else we know recorded history tells us at the same time. This late thing about the Babylonian Empire, you can tell me all the theories, I want artifacts. When I tell you about the Nile, I carry you to Egypt and I show you. I don't say it once used to be here. I say here it is. So you can theorize all you want about Sumner and Babylonia, I don't need to theorize. I gave you the artifacts. You come, you walk in it, you take on it, you sit on it, you look up at it, you look up in the ceiling, and you see Goddess Ma'at, you see Goddess Nut, you see them painted in the ceiling. Proud that when my little daughter, you have to make it that when, I'm going to close now, that when your little daughter come, and that little boy, my son, see your daughter, he knows he is not a raper. It's not a question of that, because we have already taught him that what he's looking at is a miniature size of his mother. He knows what his mother is, because he saw his mother up there with his father holding her up by the two columns of heaven, with the caption reading, God Shu, holding Goddess Nut at the two columns of heaven. And then you would know what is those two columns of heaven. One hand on her breast, the other on her pelvic region, the two columns of heaven. Not particularly the heaven you're thinking on. The same item of the human body, but the purpose being theosophical and philosophical long before the so-called philosophers of Greece. I am talking about the esoterical aspect of the human physical posture translated into concepts of theology. The sanctity of the African woman. And then I will say, son, I know, daughter, I know when you finish, I will never have to put you on the TV screen walking across with someone, narrator, saying, teenage pregnancy. Is it teenage pregnancy the problem? Or stupid parents? A teenager will get pregnant because she has the ability to be pregnant. And the boy has the ability to assist her. But nobody stopped to tell him of the responsibility of his action. Even mama don't tell him. Mama tell the girl some choice word. 4 letters and no letters. Some choice action with her foot when it's too late. But mama didn't tell the boy, the little son, son, that's like your mama. That's like your sister. You don't want your mama to get hurt. You don't want your sister to get hurt. Son, you know the answer. It isn't a teenage pregnancy. My mother was a teenage pregnant woman with a matured man. But her mother had taught her how to take care of her house, how to cook, not with screwdrivers and things. Mama knew to wash her clothes before she could go around with her everything showing, split miniskirt. Before you can show, you must know to protect. We have to deal first with ourselves in our concept of morality, our concept of integrity, before we are willing to send our youngsters out here to learn the 3 R's. They come second. The integrity of the African woman is critical. And who must maintain that integrity but the African man? Thank you.
We're not quite through. We're going to move on to a few questions and answers here. I'm going to ask you to step up to the floor mic and to keep your questions clear and brief. Address it to the person you wish to answer.
The Mhenga principles, the morality and the justice that was developed in the first to the 6th dynastic period. My question to you, given that the Old Kingdom began around 3400 BCE, that comprised of the 1st to the 6th dynasty, that germinated such marvelous culture, such as justice, morality, and the Mhenga principles, to your knowledge, what was the downfall of that glorious period before we move into the intermediate period, that catastrophe and different kind of disruption developed from the 7th to the 10th dynasty, where we end up with 30 kings within that historical period. Would you be so kind to let us know what happened, or the downfall of the first, from 1 to 6th dynasty first, and then go on to the intermediate period?
Well, I could give a pat answer, but then again to leave many questions because of the intricate nature of the question. But let us say, from the 1st to the 6th dynasty, you're talking about from Nama, the first pharaoh, the first king that united the two lands.
Yes.
We had a period of rebuilding of the nation. And everyone was involved because it is from the 3rd dynasty they were able to settle down and go into building with the experiment of Manetho when he built the first temple, the first structure of the stone, lasting structure, and so on. By the 4th dynasty and the 6th dynasty, this has expanded to a proliferation of construction pertaining to the deity and otherwise. The African brothers at that period of time was deeply involved with the adoration of his deity. All kinds of consideration. The heavy part of the budget went into the building of adoration of the deity. By the 4th dynasty, the 4th to the 6th dynasty, we saw this best at Giza with the amount of buildings there, and even the tombs of the wealthy and the privileged show that the wealthy took their money also for adoration of the deity. But we noticed a collapse from the 6th dynasty because there was this major flood that even moved the capital from Memphis and forced, because the flood engulfed the city of Memphis, forced the residents up on the highland at Saqqara. It made a whole new transition among the people. By the time they were able to get to the type of Pepi III and others, they had to revise the whole concept of direction they were going because of the damage of the flood. That was the first disastrous flood in the terms that you could even call a flood in the sense of the Great Deluge that the Hebrews speak of. But what really caused the major transition in Egypt was the 13th dynasty, when the first set of non-African foreigners invaded Egypt, the Delta region, a group of Asian people calling themselves Hyksos. To me, Egypt's downfall started, Egypt as we know, the dynastic Egypt, really started in the 13th dynasty when the Hyksos came in. What, as Professor Clarke always said, we invited some strangers to dinner and became the dinner. We invited the Hyksos to come and live among us, to work with us. And they formed as part of a fifth column inside, so that when we were attacked by their numbers outside, we were able to function. Luckily, they could not penetrate very far and only was able to go to Avarice, which still is in the Delta. So you could say that the Egypt downfall had already been stated and shown from the 6th dynasty, started in its reality in the 13th dynasty, and from then on, as you know, there was a matter of foreigners invading, foreigners being pushed out, foreigners invaded, and as they invade and leave, they would denude the Nile Valley of everything they could put their hands on.
In the 4th dynasty, Cheops, Khephren, and Mycerinus, they all seems to fall within the 4th dynasty. What was the major function of these three brilliant kings?
The major functions of, they were the builder kings, like Khufu, which the Greeks called Cheops, Khafra, which they called Khephren, and Menkaura, which they called Mycerinus, were primarily builders. They did very little or no warfare. They concentrated in building the state. As a matter of fact, they even added 2 more states. They started out with 40 states or 40 nomes. They are the ones that added the 2 more nomes, so that instead of the 40, Egypt having 40 states or equivalent, Egypt was moved to 42 states, and adding the 2 states, 2 southern states, what Egypt did was to bring into fore Nubia, and that is something that I'm looking into now. The depth of the influence of Nubia in molding Egypt from as early as the 4th and 6th dynasty, rather than the 11th dynasty that European writers make us to believe.
Again, I ask you as you step up, would you please make your questions brief?
You might have stopped talking.
Leo doing our briefs.
They don't know.
I will make this one. Dr. Ben, there was one thing I wanted to ask you, which was, you have, I've read that you have an encyclopedia that is forthcoming, and I was anxious to know when it may be in print.
The encyclopedia was written, as a matter of fact, Dr. Clarke and Professor Moore and a number of us met in the Armory, I think as late as 1977 or around there. The question is $400,000.
That's all?
That's all. There is color. I'm lucky, as I said this now, that the first time I'm going to have a book with 800 pages already coming in color. It's the first time because of but if figuring the 7 volumes with colors and different things like that, now what would happen, I think 77 or 78 was the last time I dealt with those books. It means that we have to bring it up at least 5 years back. So that will be now 86. We have to bring it at least 86 for it to have any value. Can you imagine what time it took for me to bring the book, them? I started way around 1940, 41 to 77. It's just, I would need about 20 people on the staff full time.
My other question was, Dr. Clarke has a book that's forthcoming, and I want to know when that might be available.
Well, the book is called Africa at the Crossroads, Notes for an African World Revolution. The publisher has promised the book for May, so you can expect it in June, because publishers' schedules are nearly always a month off. I'll be very pleased. It's my first big political book, so therefore I'm going to make a lot of fuss over it and let you know it's for sale. And I have a son of 3 more years of college and 13-room house. All these things had to be paid for. So I need the money.
I wanted to ask you both, listening to you over the years and gaining my sense of African centricity, I've realized that it's important for us to work together within the confines of this. In the United States, it's in the Caribbean. That's only one group. There are many groups of what is called entrepreneurs. There's an organization of 100 men and I think 100 women. There are numerous organizations now of African Americans and Caribbean and African delegation. There has been a delegation about 3 months ago from Africa came here to speak with African Americans only in terms of business. The usual statement that Africans don't want African Americans and African Americans don't want that thing is gone. Gone for good, thanks heaven. It should have been gone long ago. I think with all the social trips we have made, at least one thing, we know we each other. That much we got in common. And that's gone. And with the influx of Caribbean people, especially in Brooklyn and the Bronx, that's gone again because they're getting together. I saw some new babies. So I know you're all getting together. And the participation of African Americans with respect to the floods and different things in the Caribbean and equally in North Carolina and things like that, we have been helping each other now. And I think what has happened by those who have led the bull by the horn in South America and all over, for the social trips, did it all. They are the ones who have gone with the people-to-people contact and made this possible. So they are, look around and you will find, of course, I want you to know, you may invest with an African person, whether African, Caribbean, African, and go broke. It happens. You don't get mad and say all African people are bad or all African people can't do anything, because banks fail every day, not Freedom National alone, and at least the government giving all the people back 100% except Freedom National. Thank you very much.
I'd like to add that if your mission in building a business in Africa is only to get rich, your mission is unworthy of African people at this juncture in history. There is no serious objection to people making a profit from their investors. But if we're going to go as imitation white capitalists, Africa has enough of those already.
Yes, sir.
I don't think a lady has asked a question. Yeah. I think that their mind, I like the way their mind works, and when it's on cue, it's on cue. I thought a lady would have a question now.
But I still have a question to Dr. Clarke. I would like to know, Dr. Clarke, in addition to our scholarly work, with our studies and our reading, you suggested in order to free our African minds that we travel and live extensively in Africa. And in the second part of that question, in mine, I made one trip to Africa, to Egypt and Ghana, and I found a lot of Muslims while I was there. And I noticed in your comments tonight you had a comment about Muhammad and Abdullah. Do you find a problem with Africans calling themselves Muslim? And the last,
all right, finish your question now.
the last part of the question is, within this country, outside of this particular circle, the only other force I see for change and development and nationhood is the Nation of Islam, Minister Farrakhan. And I'd like to know, do you have a dialogue with them, and what can we do together?
Now, what was the first part? All right, I got it now. If we want to free our African mind, we must free our minds from all forms of foreign influence on our mind, and we must approach Africa pure and simple. I do not think that there is a religious solution for Africa, irrespective of the religion. I think there's a cultural and a political solution, and many of the brothers who think they are Muslims are Arabists and apologizers for Arabism. If you said that, do you have a problem? Yes, I have a problem with the Christians too, only a bigger problem. I have a problem with the Christian, with religious cover-up and people hiding behind the skirt of God or the cap of Allah, not doing what they're supposed to do. I have no fight with Minister Farrakhan other than the fight that he spent so much time aggrandizing his own ego. He's spending so much time announcing programs that he's not carrying out. Some of the things he's announced are very good. Let him carry them out. I'm tired of people copping out into religion as an excuse for not being a part of struggle.
I would like to add a clarification I think my elder brother was making, which I wish to endorse. What Dr. Clarke is saying, there is nothing in an Arabic name that has anything to do with Islam. What happened is, since Islam came up in an Arabic context in the desert, it reflects an Arabic position. For instance, most African culture has a base with the mother. You inherit from your mother. Islam, on the other hand, being Arabic, coming from the desert, is a male-dominated culture. You inherit from your father. That is an African, in spite of the fact that Hadsad Kubad ibn Radat, you may know him as Bilal, impacted on Islam and became its first head of the embassies, even though he was asked to be the spiritual leader 3 times by Abu Bakr, Muhammad the Great, and the Prophet himself. What has happened? Like all religions, people know the rituals and the dogmas, but ignore the historical development. Under Islam, Africa was first enslaved and then extended to the European. Islam enslaved Africa in 18 AH, after the Hijrah, equivalent to 640 of the Common Era. It is Islam who started to deliver Africans to the Europeans that caused the Europeans to enslave Africans from 1509. And what we are saying, and I said it in the first part of my lecture, the African woman in what they call a war just the other day was the sufferer of this thing. If you notice recently, when they're showing the pictures of Kuwait, you now see the black people. You didn't see the black people in the guards. They press carefully pictured only what they wanted. But African women would have fought to lose and did lose their sons and daughters on both sides of this skirmish to a slave master from Arabia and a slave master from Europe.
I would like to call your attention to an aspect of Islamic influence that not a single Muslim scholar has ever addressed himself to, especially the black ones. I know a number of blacks who are Muslims and who are well-known scholars. They have never addressed themselves to the North African destruction of the Western Sudan, that destruction of the University of Sankore, the exiling of the great scholar Ahmed Baba in Morocco, the demeaning of the destruction of this area by a dynasty of half-breeds called Ahmars. They have not addressed themselves to the partnership found between the Portuguese slave traders and the Arab slave traders in East Africa. They have not a single one has read the book UNESCO Documents 2 dealing with slave trade in the Indian Ocean, or the vast amount of information. They kept saying that Islam is the black man's true faith, and it's Adam, God created the first Muslim, his name is Adam. I don't know where they get all this nonsense from. What is nonsense about the Asiatic black man? Why don't you cop out fools, stop kidding yourself, go to work and help us liberate ourselves, or get the hell out of our way.
That's the frosting.
That's part of what took place here. Remember that it's with the joint venture with the New York Urban League and Common Baptist Church. We'd like to see it happen again. You are a wonderful audience. Thank you for your participation.
Go ahead. No, they're going to the Indian restaurant from here. And I did too.
That's right. I didn't know what it was to have a home where you could actually sleep.
So if they don't,
And I didn't know what Rouse remember. She said every